So I'm going to go ahead and introduce you. AZA, and I'd love to actually hear about your name, but AZA is extra bright. That is really the summary of your bio. You're extra bright. You are a first generation American. You grew up in Trinidad. You studied a whole lot of things, biology, philosophy, jazz studies. You studied three separate things at a historically Black college and university, North Carolina Central University. I didn't know that about you, AZA.
Yeah.
And then you did PhD training at MIT in neuroscience. And you did it as part of the Harvard Medical School MIT MD PhD program. So you're a doctor. You're a Dr. MD, you're a Dr. PhD. And you're also an Emerson Scholar at Berklee College of Music. I've heard of Berklee because I know one other person that went to Berklee for music. Mm-hmm. And then you have a whole bunch of things here in your bio that I'm going to try to break down so that people can understand, vis-a-vis asking you questions later on when we talk.
Okay.
So basically you say you study how music, mindfulness, and psychedelics change social behavior. And then you have some other things here that sound really complicated. You are guided by the belief that deconstructing these mechanisms will provide a better understanding of how social groups function and offer insights into enhancing the evolution of society at large. You teach yoga and mindfulness, I'm not surprised by that, in an effort to increase exposure to tools that reduce impact of stress and promote empathic behavior. You're the co-founder of Renaissance Entertainment, LLC, which is a company that operates at the intersection of art, science, and community building to influence culture. And I've heard some of your music. I'm one of those lurkers online that like listens to and sees what people are doing and just like kind of stays in the weeds. And you are currently a part of the Department of Psychiatry at Yale. You're a resident, you're a researcher, you're a creator, you're a performer. Thank you for joining me today. Your name, AZA. I've always been curious.
Yeah.
Is this a given name at birth?
This is a name that I changed to in my third year of med school. That was a part of how I integrated my full identity into sort of, my professional space, was by using the name that I had started to use as my artist name in the sort of professional space. And it was definitely something that I felt I needed to do, to be intentional again about for myself, being clear about sort of what I was valuing and centering and why.
Mm-hmm. So you'd be carrying the music part of your identity, really the whole part of yourself, into your medical professional work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does it have a meaning?
Yeah, I mean, it has a few layers of meaning, but AZA really stands for kind of the cycle of birth and death and sort of rebirth. And it's like you start off in life at a certain place, and I think a lot of our passions and kind of who we are at our core is there in us from birth. Like it's there really early. Mm-hmm. But then I think sometimes due to our conditioning and stuff, we go kind of really far away from who we are to try to find something. And oftentimes that search brings us back to like where we started and the things that were always kind of innate to us and true to us. And so AZA for me kind of represents that cycle of me coming back to kind of like myself and the things I've always been passionate about and valued, and making those things central to like my identity across the board.
Mm-hmm. Names are powerful. Your story, at least in the States, on the state side, started with this transition from Trinidad to the United States. Can you talk to me a little bit about that transition? What it was like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think so it's elementary school, and I think there was a lot of excitement in moving to a new country because I think there's a lot of feeling of possibility and potential and growth, which I think was really exciting. I think getting used to a new culture I think learning that, I think that this idea of there's not one way to do something.
Yes.
You know, like you, as
Yes.
growing up in Trinidad, you're exposed to a certain energy, a certain vibration, a certain way of being, a certain way of doing things. Then when you came up here, it's like, oh, okay, things can be a different way, you know?
Yes, absolutely.
And when we came, we moved a few different places. So I lived as far south as Macon, Georgia. I lived in like sort of, you know, the New York area. I was born in Brooklyn before going back to Trinidad as a baby. So moving around in that area. And so I think that was a big learning point as a young child, was just learning like there are different viewpoints and different ways and perspectives of doing life, which I think made me already really open. And then moving across America and seeing even the differences in the South versus the North. I think as a part of that, there's like, you know, teasing and bullying and like as you're trying to fit in and learn like this new culture. I think those are some of the I guess associations that come up when I think about those early, you know, those early days.
Figuring out where you fit in, sense of belonging. But the takeaway was that our cultures inform how it is that we move and operate in this world, and inform our perceptions or patterns of behavior. And having this increased exposure helped to open up your mind.
Yeah.
When did you put that together? Because sometimes we have these experiences and don't really know what the takeaway is until like much later.
I don't think I really understood the value that had for me until I was already in med school.
Wow.
Probably. I think I knew the value of sort of my upbringing and having like a really close-knit family, and again, just having even this idea of extended family that is so rich, I think, in the Caribbean culture, and can sometimes not be, it can be sometimes harder to maintain, I think, in the US. So all of those things I think were already really obviously shaping me, but I think beginning to see how like these different experiences growing up were really kind of setting the stage and allowing me to learn how to even, I think, read. I think you become really good at reading, I think, even certain social cues, or reading the room, when you have to adapt to a new culture.
Yes.
I think, again, as a kid, like you want to fit in, you want to like be cool. And so you're paying attention, you know, and you're really studying, trying to like learn how to become a part of this new world. And so, yeah, I think in med school, near the end of med school, actually, is when I really started to see how that had kind of shaped me in a certain way.
I appreciate you saying that, because sometimes you don't realize the value in your experience until much later, and the value in hardship until much, much later. We're talking a little bit about fitting in, reading a crowd, reading a group. And to me, that represents a type of challenge that people who transition experience. If you were to pick one or two challenging aspects of your transition as you go back into the recesses of your memory, what would those be? What were some of the significant challenging parts of the transition?
I think a big part of it was, on the flip side, was like moving a lot as a child. So not just moving to the United States, but once we moved here, we moved.
Settling, figuring out, yes.
Yeah, just trying to like make moves and, you know, build and things like that. And so
why were you guys moving so much?
Following like job opportunities, essentially.
Economic opportunity.
Again, I think, you know, for my parents, when they moved here, it's like they didn't have anything, just, you know, the family that was here, and you know, the opportunities that they could begin to create through like networking and stuff like that. And so, you know, I think there was such a journey that we went through. And so moving a lot, I think sometimes it can be hard to, like, I know people who like had the same friends since elementary school, you know, and like I don't really have that, because like I think my youngest friends are maybe from like the end of middle school or high school, and it's only like a few people And so I tend to move like at every kind of stage in life a lot. And so I think that was one of the hardships, especially when we lived in the South. When we first moved here, there was a lot of kind of, I think, racial things that I think I learned in a way here that wasn't the same as in Trinidad. So
Totally.
Trinidad, there's still racial tensions, but it tends to be between those of African descent and those of East Asian, descent. I was aware of that dynamic, but I think in the United States, it was just so much more of a palpable thing, I think, and in different ways. And it would show up, I think, to my parents more because they also had like very strong accents. And so that even, was a thing that I think, again, just starting to show me how different people's experiences, how different people move through, even how you move through the world could draw certain kinds of attention to you, in different ways.
Hey family, if you're finding value in our content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us reach more Caribbean immigrants who need guidance, encouragement, and a safe space to talk about mental health. Let's build this community together because our well-being matters. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. One love.